Okay. 100 years ago, people overwhelmingly died of infection. And that's before the start of the NHS. Okay. If you look at what's killing people now, yes, a few people die of infection, but it's a vast, overwhelming minority. And what's killing people, particularly in westernised, industrialised societies, is what we call non-communicable disease. So infection is communicable disease, non-communicable disease, so stroke, heart attack, cardiovascular disease, raised blood pressure, cancer and dementia. And that huge change, that dynamic has happened in 100 years. Now if you think about your genes and you were trying to explain it as a genetic change, it's inconceivable. Because we think in terms of genetic changes happening over 100, 200, 1,000 years. It can't be that, it has to be lifestyle. Up until until austerity, life expectancy in this country was growing steadily. With the introduction of austerity, it first plateaued and now it's dropping. But even through that period, what's interesting was though people were living longer, but they weren't living longer healthy. They were living longer but unhealthy lives. So my interest is, A, what's the cause of all of this? And B, is there some way to expand healthy life expectancy? So health span, and we've introduced a new service called ProLongevity. Bit of a funny title, but to prolong and improve longevity. Now, since the other thing to know is, I don't know if you know this, prolonged sitting is as dangerous as smoking. So since we're in a pub, I thought we should do a pub quiz. But I want you to stand up, depending what you think the answer is, and stand up and give the answer, okay? So this is A, a pub quiz, and B, it's improving your health, okay? So the first question is fasting healthy or unhealthy? Those people think it's unhealthy, please stand up.
Sorry, say
Is fasting unhealthy, right? Unhealthy, okay. Okay.
Understanding the question is flummoxing.
Is fasting healthy or unhealthy? Who says unhealthy? Okay. You have to stand up.
No, sorry.
So
So
if you think it's unhealthy, stand up.
If you think fasting
But if
is
you think it's healthy to fast, sit
if
down.
you think fasting is unhealthy, stand up. Okay. Okay. If you think fasting is healthy, then sit down. If you think fasting is healthy, stand up. Okay, so everyone should have stood up once. Okay, okay. Right, so next question. Is longevity mainly genetic or mainly lifestyle? So how long you live, is it, who says it's genetic?
I said 6 of one, half dozen of the other, really.
Okay, so you're halfway up.
Yeah.
Who says it's lifestyle?
Can I
Stand up,
can I just put my hand
stand
up,
up,
please?
stand up, stand up. Okay.
Yeah.
Are men automatically predestined to live less time than women? We know that they do, but is it something inherent? Who thinks that men are designed to live less long than women?
Stress kills them.
Okay. Who thinks they're designed to live the same length of lives as women? I'm not seeing people standing up.
I'm standing. I don't want to knock
Okay.
each other.
Right. Okay. Next question. There's not many more. Which matters more, diet or exercise? Who says diet?
I'll say diet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And who
In
says
the context of the day and age that we live in. Yeah.
And who says exercise?
I also say exercise.
So that's 50-50.
We need
Okay.
both.
Right. Does eating fat make you fat?
No.
Who says yes? Who says no? Okay. Right.
Depends
Are
what
all
type of
next
fat.
question? Sit down. Are all calories equal? Who says yes?
Yes.
Calories are
A calorie is a calorie.
Calories are calorie, yeah.
Okay. And who says no? Okay.
Depends what you eat
Right.
calorie-wise.
Okay. What is it that makes us fat? Is it a mixture of gluttony and sloth? In other words, we need to eat less and move more. Who agrees with that?
No.
Okay. And who disagrees? Okay. Right.
Balancing
Okay.
budget.
Next question. Is breakfast the most important meal of the day? Who says yes? Okay. And who says no? Okay. And then just shout out, how much sleep should we get?
7.
No.
7 plus.
7 to 8. Okay.
No.
Okay.
I don't agree with that.
So
what's your answer then?
I'd say around 6 hours.
it's
6
about.
hours the optimum sleep. I sleep 11:30. My alarm goes at 11:30.
Okay. I'm not going to attempt to answer all the questions. There isn't time, but I'm just making you think. I have got the answers to them all. So, Anyone here heard about the microbiome? Okay. In your gut, there are 2 or 3 kilograms of bacteria. Primarily, 2 or 3 kilograms of bugs. Bacteria being the dominant species, but you've got viruses, eukaryotes, and fungi. And people are talking about that as a sort of an unknown organ. And if I said to you, this microbiome has a huge effect on your health, your longevity, and even on your mental health. Okay. So if I said to you, you've got 22,000 genes, would you think that's pretty good? Yeah. If I said that's fewer genes than a fruit bat or an earthworm, would that surprise you? Right? Actually, we've only got a few more genes than a banana. So why are Homo sapiens, the human race, so incredibly successful? We've managed to harness the genetic material in our gut to our advantage. So we're not just using our own genes, we've harnessed the genetic material, and the genetic material in our gut is 100 times greater than our own genetic material. So you've got the genome and the microbiome. The microbiome outweighs the genome by about 100 to 1. So we're only really 1% human. Okay? And it turns out the bugs in the gut do all sorts of things for us. They consume our energy, and then we don't. They manufacture our vitamins, and they have a huge effect on our mood. And if we kill them off, it ain't so good for us. Okay. If you think about, for example, the skin on your body, it's got a variety of functions, but one of them is it acts as a barrier to infection. And we know that if you damage your skin, eczema, psoriasis, or even you get a scratch, you can get an infection. If you're really unlucky, you can end up with a sepsis. And if you're really, really unlucky, it can be a killer. Okay. Exactly the same thing is true of the lining of your gut. And it turns out the lining of the gut is the quality of the lining of the gut is maintained, the integrity of the gut lining is maintained by the microbiome. Okay? If you damage the microbiome of your gut, you get this thing called leaky gut, which you may have heard about, and most GPs will be really dismissive of leaky gut. But it's just like on the surface of your skin, so you've got individual cells with cement layers in between. And if you start to lose the cement, then the cells come apart and things can penetrate. Exactly the same thing is true in the gut. And if you think about the food inside the gut, it's not really inside you, it's passing through. So if the gut wall the integrity is good, then you take the nutrients from the food and the bacteria and the toxins pass out the other end, okay? If you start to damage the gut lining, then those bacteria and the associated toxins can enter directly into the bloodstream. They don't kill you, but it sets up a whole load of autoimmune processes and inflammation. Okay, so at that point, you end up with all sorts of problems, and not just physiological problems associated with illnesses like type 2 diabetes. Turns out it has a huge effect on your mental health as well. So alongside this growth and the non-communicable diseases I was talking about, the type 2 diabetes, the dementia and so on, there's also been a huge rise in autoimmune disease, so type 1 diabetes, asthma, inflammatory bowel disease, and even autism. Now, has anyone heard of the vagal nerve?
Yes.
Yeah? So the vagal nerve goes from the central nervous system straight into the gut. And you've actually got fronds of brain tissue in your gut in an area called the mesentery, that some people call a second brain. And it turns out there's two-way signalling. So there's signalling in this direction to that direction, but there's equally signalling from that direction to this direction. Do you know the sort of thing, gut feeling, gut instinct, I was gutted? So the vagal nerve goes in two directions. And you've probably heard of the happy hormone serotonin.
Yeah.
Okay. When people are depressed, we give them drugs to improve their serotonin. So if I said to you that most of your serotonin isn't here, 95% of it is here, and it's generated by the bugs, you can kind of see how if you kill off those bugs, you're not going to be a very happy person.
No.
Right? So there's the beginning of one part of the story, which is maintaining the integrity of the gut, the bugs in your gut. You look after them and they look after you, right? Just like a tropical rainforest, right? And if you don't, you end up with deforestation and all sorts of problems. And that will predispose you to a lot of these diseases. But there's another side to the story, and that's about insulin, okay? So this whole idea of eat less and move more is a problem, is completely wrong. I'll give you an example. Why don't we die in our sleep as we stop breathing?
an instinctive thing to breathe.
Yeah. Okay. Are you sitting there thinking, I need to control the pH of my blood absolutely accurately? And if I don't think about it, my blood will go out, the pH will go wrong, and I'll. Right? Okay. Are you sitting there thinking about your blood pressure or your heartbeat or your rate of respiration? Right?
I've got a watch to
Right.
do that.
Right. So all living organisms practice homeostasis, and that means even the simplest single-cell organism very tightly controls its internal environment. And the same is true of weight, hunger, and satiety. So we've been educated by the food system, by basically the big manufacturers. The reason we all believe that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and it's just a question of burning more calories, eating more calories and consuming them, is because Kellogg's has spent billions and billions and billions of pounds convincing us of a myth. And if you look at the evidence, there's absolutely no evidence for this. The prime hormone in all of this, so if you accept my thesis that actually weight, hunger and satiety aren't under your voluntary control, probably explains why no diets work. So every single diet we know worked for 3 months, no diets work for 12 months, and you can't outrun a bad diet, because you're trying to fight against your body's natural mechanisms, right? If you go into the wilds and look at African animals, none of them are dieting, right? None of them are worried about getting into their bikinis, right? No one goes to a gym, okay? If you look at the hunter-gatherer tribes that still live a lifestyle of what human beings probably lived 40,000 years ago, no one's got dementia, no one's got hypertension, no one's got diabetes, no one's on a diet, no one goes to the gym, and no one's fat. Because everything is working in the way that it's intended to do. So hunger, satiety, weight are controlled by the natural mechanisms. Now the dominant hormone that controls all of this is a hormone called insulin. Okay. Now what do we know about type 1 diabetics? They've got no insulin and they're thin. Okay. What happens when you give them insulin? They put weight on. And if you keep giving them more and more insulin, they'll get fatter and fatter, and they can end up with type 2 diabetes as well. Okay. What we tend to do in the way that we eat is we're continually spiking our insulin. What that does is it puts the body into energy storage mode, right? So you've probably heard of the first law of thermodynamics, which is that energy it can only be changed, but it can't be used up. It has to go from one thing to another. That's perfectly true. But that's not the same as eat less, move more. You know, we're not physics, we're biology. And the body's got many, many mechanisms to either use energy or store energy. But the way that we eat, particularly we have a high sugar, high carb diet, permanently raises our sugars. And because we're only designed to have 5 mils of sugar in our entire bloodstream at any time, and we tightly control it, as soon as your blood sugar goes up, your insulin goes up. And insulin does 2 things. It makes you store the energy, and it also makes you save energy, right? So we think about people with type 2 diabetes as basically lazy lard asses, because they eat too much and they move too little. They do, it's true. The reason they do that is their insulin is up here, they're in permanently energy storage mode, and they're also, all their natural mechanisms make them reduce their amount of energy consumption. And by the same token, if you get a rat or a mouse and you pump it full of insulin, instead of running around the cage and socialising, it will eat the food, go back to sleep. If you move the food to the other side of the cage, it will waddle over to the other side of the cage, eat the food and go back to sleep. Right? There are complete animal models for this. So essentially, if you bring calories into the body, there are 2 options: burn it or store it. Okay? If you set your body mechanisms in permanent storage mode, you'll be storing the energy and reducing your energy consumption permanently. Okay? And that's why you can be eating all this food, you can be 200 pounds overweight, but you're hungry all the time. Because all the time the body thinks it's starving, and it's not actually making the energy available to you, it's like locked away, probably locked away around here. So, this is a whistle-stop tour through some very complex science, so I hope and I've got limited time, but I'm happy to stay behind and answer any questions. So this is what we have done. We've taken a device which is primarily used for type 1 diabetes, mainly used by kids. And it's a little sensor with a tiny little probe, and the sensor goes there, and then you either use the NFC chip on your phone, you know, the Google Pay chip, or you use one of these. And it gives you instant, printout. That tells you at any time what your blood sugar levels are, okay? That information comes to me on my phone and via an app, and I can continually monitor what your blood glucose is doing. So we've got that on the one side. On the other side, we get you to record what you eat and drink and what your lifestyle is, and we do that for 2 weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, we can then see, and we also take into account all the other things, so all the holistic measures, sleep, cortisol, stress, any ongoing medication you might want to take, and what outcomes you're seeking, right? So it might be I want to lose weight, it might be I've got polycystic ovarian syndrome and I want to get pregnant, also due to raised insulin, interestingly enough. It might be I want to bring my blood pressure down. So we very much individualise it. We take a lot of baseline information. After 2 weeks, we've kind of got you sussed, and then there's an intervention. So the first meeting is usually face-to-face, but it doesn't have to be. So that all of this can be run face-to-face, or all of it can be run virtually. So my first client, I did this with, she's Israeli, and when I first spoke to her, I said her diet was just so awful. She had a diet of carbs, 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 and carbs. She was eating every hour or two, continually hungry. She was 30 or probably 30 kilos overweight, paying all the price of the type 2 diabetes, the cancer, okay? And I've coached her since then by WhatsApp. She's had one of these sensors, she's lost 4 stone since then. And all those problems have resolved. So we bring together your lifestyle and your glucose, we understand what spikes you, and then we do little food swaps, right? Have you heard me mention calories? I won't be mentioning calories, right? Because calories out, right? Which if you sort of summarise, it's psycho, isn't it? Right? It is psycho, right? We don't talk about calories, we're only interested in the quality of the food, the variety of the micronutrients in your diet, and we are seeing huge benefits. So weight's coming down, waist is coming down, blood pressure's coming down, all those risks. And that's why we're calling it ProLongevity.
Amazing.
Brilliant.
It's so exciting, sorry, because